have a couple of cans of sardines, a little bit of liquid. Days go by, the sardines are gone, the liquid's gone, no boat on the horizon. You can only go so long without water. You can go, I went 57.5 weeks without food. I lost 54 pounds during my cancer treatment. Liquid, much more difficult. Your body is 74% water. It needs continual resupply. Your body uses water up in its regular activities. This young cabin boy, even though he was advised not to, drink seawater. You'll die from that. It'll poison, that salinization will poison you. And so he's near death, everybody's starving. And the captain makes probably the hardest decision of his life. He says, if we don't get some sustenance, and by the way, your blood has, this is going to be gross, your blood has water in it, and they need liquid. On the march to Corregidor and Bataan during the Second World War, there were American GIs drank their own urine to survive because it did have some modicum of H2O in it. And so the captain decides, listen, we should either draw straws or we can just, why don't we just kill a cabin boy and eat him to survive, or we're all going to die. Well, the cabin boy's out of it, but he's not dead yet. And one of the crew members says, I can't do that. And the first mate says, I'll hold him down. The captain's got a penknife, so they make this decision and they kill the cabin boy, and then they have lunch. And a few days later, a ship shows up on the horizon just as they're finished with breakfast. And when the ship comes alongside and looks in this boat, it sees bones. It's not too hard to put that together. So they take him back to England, they turn him into the authorities, and they go to court and they get found guilty of cannibalism. Until it gets reviewed by the Supreme Court of England. And they said those are exigent circumstances, circumstances so unusual, so beyond anybody's control. Better one die than four. So 3 live and 1 dies. Who's going to die anyway? Just wasn't dying quick enough. The court reverses the decision. Does not endorse cannibalism, but says it understands under those conditions. 1971, there's an airplane, I believe, leaves Peru, going to Chile with the entire soccer team, crashes in the Andes. It's called a miracle of the Andes. 1/3 of the people die on impact. Another 25% of them freeze to death. A couple go out and try and get help. And the rest of them, after a period of time, decide the only way to survive is to eat the dead. And they do. And they're not charged with a crime. It was my wife you just ate, and she deserves a decent burial, and now there's nothing to bury, but it's against the law to desecrate a corpse. Just like it's against the law to kill someone so you don't starve to death. And these are real situations. Those are both real cases. And there's more than that. This isn't Jeffrey Dahmer just deciding he's going to chomp down on your calf. These are what we call exigent circumstances, circumstances so beyond our capacity to control that we flex the moral code a little bit to try and accommodate it. Those weren't easy decisions for anybody to make. I forget how many days they spent in the Andes. It was like weeks. And they'd heard the search party got called off. They had a radio and to listen to. They didn't have one to speak to. And they thought they were just going to die up there. And here Mill's theory comes into play again. As long as we're getting a pay raise, the greatest happiness for the greatest number. And we have these real life decisions to make. Some of you are going to have to pull a plug on your parents or grandparents. We were feeding the cancer the first time, so we pulled the feeding tube out of my mom. The feeding tube wasn't going to save her, it was just going to make the cancer. And my dad, he couldn't feed himself, so he didn't want hydration. Without water, you don't. And that was in his living will. We'll get to living wills in about 3 weeks, how important they are. I know families that have never talked to each other again because someone made the moral decision what they thought was right, but not everybody agreed. So the people who agreed were okay with it, and the people didn't never talked to them again. I've literally sat down with families and said, I'll never talk to that SOB again. Never, ever, ever. I've got friends right now, different political parties, they never talk to each other. It's like, wow. To them, it's a moral issue. So, the point of doing this is to make ethics real. And all these theories are real. Moral duty, do you expect a fireman to run into a building completely consumed with fire when you can't save that, even if it's a 3-year-old child on the 3rd story? Did you really expect me to swim out into a lake 50 yards further and I almost drowned last? It's easy to say yes, of course. We all understand that. Until you have to go in the water, until you have to go in the building, until you have to pull the plug, until you have to honor someone's request. And it's the law, so you're really fulfilling the law, but it's just tearing you up inside. And the law is going to get really close to when people have had enough, they're going to ask someone to put them out of their misery. It's called voluntary active euthanasia. And some of you will say, well, you can't do that, that's killing them. Well, we kill convicted murderers. We evidently can justify killing people for justice sake, but not for mercy's sake, and that'll be one of the arguments that'll come up. Well, how can you justify justice and not mercy? Is mercy more important than justice? Well, it all depends on which side of the moral spectrum you're on. For some people, they just have to have justice. Even when we find out 10% of the people we found guilty of murder weren't really guilty in the first place. We just thought they were. We have no idea if we've killed an innocent person yet. But some people, justice is important, and if they happen to kill the innocent, that's the price of justice. It's the greatest happiness for the... I can understand that. Just like I can understand having to remove someone from life support. So the problem with what Dr. Sandel presented us today, it's a setup. It's designed to be a setup. It wants you to think through it. It's not just principles, it's real life. You may be in a situation where you cannot avoid responsibility in a jet being hijacked. God forbid someone ever comes through that door. And that's what morality is all about. It's decision making, quality of decision making, what to do in a given set of circumstances. And in this case, it may not be time to think. As a professor, as the head of the, I think about this. I've got an idea in my head, you don't. I'm okay with that. I prefer you didn't. But I've got an idea in my head. Someone better have a plan. You know, brake the car, turn left, turn right. Oh, by the way, you know, in the tunnel where you either run over someone who falls off the scaffold, I've had students say, well, what if I just ride the wall? I know I'm going to destroy my car, but maybe if I do that, I'll avoid hitting the person, or maybe I won't injuring them unto death. Oh, there is another alternative. Good thinking. You're thinking now. You're thinking through moral dilemmas. Ethics is about thinking our way through and then acting our way through moral dilemmas, people. There's no avoiding it. You will all face moral dilemmas sooner or later. Cheating. If we in the old day, when I'd give out 40 questions in a Scantron, I'd walk right out of here. You want to cheat? Go for it. You think that hurts me? Farmers are the brightest people on the planet. You know, if you don't put a seed in the ground, you're not going to get anything out. And what you put in is what you're going to get out. You put an apple seed in the ground, you're not getting a corn plant. And every seed not only reproduces after its own kind from a lesser degree to a greater degree, it's a lesser quantity to a greater quantity. You put a corn seed in the ground, it's going to put a shaft up. It's going to put 6, 8, 10, maybe 12 ears of corn, each one having 100 or 200 ears from one seed. You cheat once, what do you think is going to happen the second time, the third time, the fourth time, the fifth time? If you're honest, what do you think is going to happen the second time, the third time, and the fourth time? That's what moral decisions are based on. You make the right decision because that's not only the way it's supposed to be, but because that's what gives us what we call a way of life. And that's why we have rules that say no lying, stealing, cheating, raping, robbing, red light, green light when you leave campus. They're the best rules we know of. Not because they're rules, because they save lives, because they make life better. More people are happy when we follow the rules than when we don't follow the rules. And that's what this class is all about, people. So, in a way, I always want to apologize. It gets a little heavy, and then I don't want to apologize because you ain't seen nothing yet. It's going to get a whole lot intense, more. It's my job. Anyway, questions for me, people? Okay. If you came in late, let me know you're here. Red light, green light when you come back.